Hello everyone. We have started the broadcast. We'll just wait for another couple of minutes as we let stragglers come on in. Just reading your comments, Joe, about the Moodle login. I have had a similar problem as well. I'll have to message James and see if anything can be done about that while the broadcast is going. For now, they will just sort of roll with the screen and hope that we can get things fixed. If anyone else is having a problem, please send a comment in on the chat, and we'll try and get that sorted. Hope everyone's week's been good though. We've been looking over the comments that have been coming into the forum, and it's been really, really great. So continue to send those in. A lot of interesting comments and work going into that. Okay, looks like quite a few people are having that issue. So I'll maybe hand over to Steve for a couple of minutes in the short term and get on the blower to James.
All right, thank you very much, Guy. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I'll do that in a couple of minutes. But anyway, everyone, welcome to week 2 of the Certified Technical Trainer short course facilitated by IT Masters and Charles Sturt University, or CSU. Presented by your mentor, who you just heard, Steve Zobrist. Today, Steve will be covering facilitation of a technical class, including learning methods and management, group exercises, and instructional media such as games and simulations. We'll also have a representative from CSU to speak in detail about the master's courses they offer at the end of this live lecture, and there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end of that as well. As always, send in your questions via the chat function, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. But for now, welcome, Steve.
All right, thank you very much, Guy. Quick question for you too, Guy. You got the session being recorded?
Yes.
Brilliant. All right. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are joining us from. Last week, we covered several areas, if you remember, to include evaluating the learner, determining learning objectives, reviewing the ADDIE model, and of course managing the course. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for so much input and so many ideas and thoughts that you put into your homework assignment. It really was cool to read a lot of those ideas and your background, your history, and like I said, fantastic ideas, and it showed that a lot of thought went into the responses. We had responses to include changing the color of the room, ensuring that sufficient space was available, multiple monitors, whiteboards, maximum participants, Wi-Fi access, safety ideas to include escape routes, marshalling areas, checklist ideas, catering to disabilities, and so on. And some of the classroom environments and some of the target audience that you had were really, at least from my perspective, really, really interesting to take a look at. So I really appreciated that. Now, another thing I really appreciated was the mix between traditional classroom training and virtual classroom training, as there were some contrasts on what would be required. I also note that there are a number of teachers involved in this course, so I've chatted with my wife and some of her colleagues regarding their thoughts. I'm going to continue to do so throughout the course for some of their ideas and input as well. Now, along those lines, I did receive some input from our ICT teacher, or one of the ICT teachers I should say, who gave me some links and so on, and I'll ask to have those posted. Now that'll be geared more towards the K-12 teachers that are attending our seminars. Just to give you maybe some ideas or some thoughts, or at least a starting point if you're just looking at the ICT area for the K-12 area. Now, as I mentioned during our last class, I always learn something from each course I teach, and this course is no different, as there were some ideas that that I will be taking away with me as well. So thank you once again very much for your input, and without further ado, let's get started on our next session. As soon as I can, there we go. All right, our objectives during this part of the session is to address the 2 areas listed, namely, select and implement delivery methods, use instructional media. Some things to keep in mind is that a technical expert may not be the best trainer. Although an expert in their field, the challenge for many is to convey their thoughts and their experience and their expertise to the learners in an effective manner. Another thought is that there are different ways of learning for children and adults with lots of different theories out there. Two important thoughts for teaching include two terms that you need to be familiar with for the CompTIA exam. And they are pedagogy, which is closely related to teaching children, and andragogy, which is closely related to teaching adults. Now, my wife is a school teacher, studied for her master's degree through Charles Sturt University, and I was her designated, I suppose, proofreader for some of her assignments for spelling, syntax, and so on, just kind of acted as a second set of eyes to catch any minor issues. Although I was unfamiliar with pedagogy, I was amazed at some of the differences and similarities of what she was writing about and what I learned as a trainer. It was an eye-opening event that prompted me to read more on andragogy and how we as adults learn. Now, there are many theories on adult learning styles, and even adults learn differently and may have learning preferences. For example, I was always a hands-on learner. In other words, show me how to do it and let me practice. I've since had to adjust my learning to include other methods such as auditory and visual learning, which has assisted me in being more flexible in my presentations. By being aware of different methods of learning, you can then pay more attention to how participants learn and adjust your style in a classroom to accommodate the differences. And you can pick up cues such as body language and other nonverbal cues. And the idea here is to focus on the participants learning and not the trainer teaching. From my perspective, the most rewarding times are when, and some of you who have taught in classes before, especially in the instructor-led training, when I'm explaining a complex subject to the participants and all of a sudden this little light bulb goes off over their heads when comprehension kicks in. I think that's just such a cool thing to see in the students. Now, of course, there's a bit of a challenge with virtual classrooms. Virtual classrooms don't have access to nonverbal cues, but they do have more access for collaboration and hands-on training and experimenting with technology to discover learning. So, although you may not have the nonverbal cues, this can be offset by using other methods such as polling, chat sessions, and asking your own questions to get feedback from your learners. And in this way, you can also gauge their involvement and participation. There are a couple of ways for us to facilitate learning, and the first is the didactic approach, and the second is trainer facilitation. The traditional didactic approach is a typical instructor-led classroom training we may be used to in school. Okay, maybe this is a little bit old school type of education, but think about how some of us were taught in primary and secondary school when our teachers were teaching us a number of things such as history, science, spelling, and trying to instill in us independent thinking, thought, and risk-taking. In this case, we were dependent upon our teachers to provide all of the required instruction. Now, keeping in mind that teaching may often be aimed toward children in establishing rudimentary and many advanced skills which are critical for us as adults. Things that we may take for granted, such as reading, writing, mathematics, and so on, are important and often form our ability to function in our society and be able to comprehend training. However, this type of traditional teaching may not work for adults. As adults, we want to really get to the meat of the course material. Now, as an aside, after speaking with several teachers last Friday, as well as my wife, even this didactic approach that I was brought up on and how I was taught as a child is fading in a lot of schools, and students are more in charge of their own learning, with the teacher acting more as a facilitator nowadays. Trainer facilitation is more of a learn by doing, or learn by using the technology. In the area of facilitating the technical class, we as trainers are more focused on facilitating the learning process rather than traditional teaching. We should strive to guide the participants through the course material to each objective. As part of the facilitation process is the delivery and demonstration of predefined course objectives. And we covered this last session. Now, it was kind of an interesting statistic that varies from source to source, is that learners in an instructor-led lecture retain about 5 to 25% of what is heard. But they retain 75% of what they do. And again, these figures kind of depend upon what the study is. So, what are some things we can do to engage our learners? Well, try to be interesting and use a sense of humor. There are some areas to stay away from as a professional, though. Areas such as politics, religion, controversial news items that should be avoided unless that is part of the training that you are providing. And also pause often to engage the learners and ask questions and receive their input. Now, as a trainer, remember that questions are your friend. Students can fall asleep during a lecture. I kind of raised my hand on that one because I remember the large lecture halls that I was sitting in with hundreds of my friends, quote unquote friends, and kind of nodding off a little bit. But you know, it's a lot harder to nod off when that pesky instructor keeps asking questions and it doesn't allow you to go off to sleep. Now, of course, if you're going to ask questions, be sure to plan your questions and know the answers beforehand. This may seem obvious, but I've seen trainers back themselves into a corner after asking a question and they didn't know what the answer was. Keep in mind that silence may mean that people are actually thinking, so don't rush for an answer. You may also need to rephrase the question. Boy, I'm guilty of this, and I found that sometimes I ask a question, and just as those words left my mouth, and I saw confused looks, I realized that I really didn't phrase that question very well. So I would have to rephrase the question for better understanding and comprehension of what I was asking for. Now try to create open-ended questions whenever you can. This can lead to a lot more questions and lead to group discussions. And quite frankly, I think this is the area that is the most rewarding and fun. It provides a great opportunity for both of us as trainers, all of us as trainers, and as well as the learner, to learn from each other. Now, I'll also admit I use what I call touchy-feelies in my classroom, my instructor-led classrooms. As an example, if I'm teaching an A+ course, which is the CompTIA computer hardware course, I'll pass around physical items like motherboards, daughter boards, hardboards, network cards, memory sticks, and so that the learners at least have an idea of what the items are rather than just looking at pictures in a book. Now obviously when they hand them out, they're already broken. I've had students bend the motherboards and drop the hard drives and everything else, so it's better to use broken equipment or at least something that you don't want to use anymore. All right, here's a polling question for you. Guy, if you could pull up this one. Going through primary and secondary school, what approach was used by your teachers? Didactic type of approach or facilitation type of approach when you're going through K through 12, or you just don't really remember anymore because it's too long ago?
That one.
Yeah. I really had to throw my memory back on what method was. And like I said, it was a didactic approach for me as a student. I will say, though, in the university, specifically my master, two of my masters rather, or one of my masters, now I'm going through the doctorate program with Charles Sturt University. That's really not happening. It's really opened up where, as a student at the university, we really are in charge of our own learning. We really have to sit down and put together what we want to learn, and our professors are more facilitators, and it's actually been wonderful.
All
right, let's. How's the polls looking there, Guy?
I'll close that one and share it. It's had 70% response there, so that was pretty good.
That's pretty good.
And there we go. 66% didactic, 11 facilitation, and as perhaps we can expect, 22 can't really remember or aren't really sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But hey, that's still pretty big, over 60% the didactic approach. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. And for the teachers out there, for the K through 12, like I said, my understanding is that all of you are going more towards the facilitation type of approach. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, I'm not a certified teacher. All right, let's move on to the next section here, selecting and implementing delivery methods. A couple of these things are going to be on your exam, number one, but number two, more importantly, it really does help you become a better trainer if you do understand a couple of these areas. So there's a couple of ways that we can learn and include both active and passive learning. With active learning, the learner is involved in the technology and the topic and exercises, practice, hands-on activities, interactions with the instructor, and so on are all included for the learner to gain knowledge and experience with. On the other hand, passive learning is more focused on absorbing learning through listening, reading, and reason. A passive learner may accept what the instructor says and then uses that information on exams. In other words, we used to call it just regurgitating the information for the exam. But keep in mind that one method is not necessarily better than the other, and they can be combined. For example, often combine both passive and active technologies, or both passive and active methods of teaching when I'm teaching courses such as networking technologies. As an example, we may cover areas such as IP subnetting, where I will give maybe a 5 or 10-minute presentation on IP addresses and what they're used for and why they're important. I then move on to demonstrating how to do simple binary math. Now the active learning process then kicks in, where we then practice binary math and do some exercises. Okay, this example may sound really boring to some of you. I mean, after all, binary math? Come on, Steve, get real. But the point is that this is an example of using passive, where I tell them about what we're going to be using it for, how it's, what it looks like and so on, and then active learning, that is actually doing it in order to meet our training objectives. Another area that you'll need to know as well revolves around the VAK model, that is visual, auditory, and kinesthetic type of learning. Now there's another version they refer to as the VARK. They stick the reading in there as well too. For the exam, I think you'll need to know the VAK, but it doesn't hurt as a professional trainer to know the R part as well too. Now our first area is the visual or the verbal learners, and these are the learners that listen to you talk and also like to write down keynotes on a whiteboard or even via PowerPoint. Your visual students like to use figures, pictures, symbolic tools such as graphs, flowcharts, hierarchies, models, and arrows and circles and squares to represent printed information. Now they're also able to explain concepts to others by drawing a figure or a picture. Now something to keep in mind as we're going through this is try to pick out what kind of a learner you are. Are you V, A, R, or K? I'll have a little question about this a little bit later on. Now regarding the second one, auditory learners, these students give more attention to the words delivered by the teachers, and they prefer to listen than writing lecture notes. After lecture's in, they choose to discuss topics which were taught with classmates as a way to kind of clarify their understanding. Our reading learners prefer printed word and text as a method to gain information, and they like lists and glossaries and textbooks and lecture notes and so on. Now, these are the students that like to arrange lecture notes into a sketch form or paraphrase or classroom notes and study multiple choice exam questions. And finally, the last one, the kinesthetic learner, likes to use experience and practice. In other words, these students should go through the experience to learn something. They tend to learn by doing. So those are our 4 areas that you'll need to be aware of for your exam, but also, probably more importantly, to become a better trainer. These different ways that your learners may absorb the information and practice the information that you present. So next poll, Guy. What type of learner best fits your method of learning? The visual, auditory, reading, kinesthetic, or maybe a combination of methods? I have noticed as I've left school and I've gone through the university courses and so on, as well as in the business world, I've actually had to learn, I've had to teach myself how to learn via different methods, if that makes any sense.
Fairly conclusive result so far.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. 75% voted, so another few seconds.
Oh, here we go. Now I can see the polling.
Yeah.
Yep.
Alrighty, so we'll share that one now.
really interesting. All right, so we have a number of visual learners, not a whole lot of auditory or reading only, a couple of kinesthetics, and yeah, 2/3 of you are a combination of methods. I like all of those because you realize the best way it is for you to do the learning. Yeah, that's really good. I like that. Oh, Richard Lane, yes, you swing the vote with how you mentioned combination. All right. Good point, Richard. Thanks. Let's see. When we're considering these different methods of learning, another way we could take a look at this also to help our students and so on is group exercises. And group exercises can be a lot of fun and allows participants to interact with each other and complete complex exercises or play different roles and so on. And some things to keep in mind are to identify who will be in the group and what the expectations are. Avoid one person coming up with all of the answers, and be sure to visit each group, if you're doing group type of activities, to observe and guide when necessary. In other words, don't just make the assignment and walk out of the room for a cup of coffee for like 20 minutes. I remember one of the group exercises I really enjoyed was Novell Network's 532 NDS design course. It was a 3-day course. Really, it was a paper-based type of group exercises, and it focused on designing topologies based upon different scenarios. And this is, like I said, a super cool course. I think one of the best ones for really experienced learners, because they had the opportunity to take what they'd learned in 3, 4, 5 other courses and take that knowledge and actually apply it into different types of scenarios. And it really was rewarding. And then we could trade ideas and do comments and critiques on each other's designs and so on. Now, of course, demonstrations may be a key to many training sessions. So keep in mind that when teaching with games and simulations, they must be relevant. I think this is a great way to wake people up after lunch. You know, I've always disliked lunches because I have a theory. What happens when your students go to lunch? Well, they eat. What happens to all the blood that should be in their brains for that afternoon? I think it just goes straight to their stomach because so many of them come back half asleep. And then again, if I cut out lunches, I found that the students get a little bit cranky, and so do I. So starting off maybe after a lunch or after a long pause or something, you get them back into the groove of things, might be something you want to consider. Anyway, when demonstrating technology, for example, you may want to use an environment that's conducive to showing what you want the learners to see. Desktop sharing applications or some other method would be very helpful at this point. I really like smart boards for interactions, as an example, but not many classrooms are outfitted with these, and they can be dreadfully expensive if you're trying to outfit 10, 15, 20 rooms. So here's kind of an example of where I used virtual machines. In fact, let me bring one up here real fast. All right, with virtual machines, I found that using something such as either Hyper-V, Microsoft's Hyper-V, or VMware, or could be Oracle's was a VBox or something along these lines, are wonderful for showing people how to do things or doing demonstrations. As an example, I have 3 different virtual machines here, so I could show people what the settings are, what the configuration is for these different things, and actually walk them through the demonstrations before I had them create a virtual machine and do the settings for their own virtual machines in their own environment. Another example, let's say I'm not doing virtual machines. Let's say I'm doing something like, I don't know, let's say Excel. And so I want to demonstrate how to, let's say, sum columns as an example. So this would be a fairly simple exercise. I place a cursor there at the bottom. I come up here to AutoSum. I can click on AutoSum. It highlights the cells that I want, and I can confirm that. The idea here, though, is to tell them what you're going to show them, if you will, or kind of as a quick summary, and then show them exactly how or what the steps are in order to complete the objective. Just do it at a steady pace and not too quick, especially if you're doing this in a virtual environment, as well as well, I should say a virtual classroom than a virtual environment. Because a virtual classroom, you have to be aware of a bit of delay quite often. So if you're going too fast as you're going through the steps, there's a screen delay quite often associated with the changing as you click through the different areas. And sometimes that can be as much as 5 seconds or more. Now, during our last session, we addressed the ADDIE model for course development. Let's continue with this a bit more, but in a slightly different direction. Instructional media may come in many different forms. For example, a course design that may be done by a professional instructor designer is one option, but now ideally a designer and trainer will work together to discuss course flow, exercises, pace slides, and so on. Again, although this doesn't always happen. Keep in mind that course materials serve as a tool in trainer facilitation, not as a replacement for the trainer. And again, not just anyone can grab a workbook and start teaching a class, and the result can be painful for everyone. I remember I had a staff person that just received their Microsoft certification and was then put into the classroom to teach the technology that he was certified for using the Microsoft, and we were using the Microsoft official courseware. Now, unfortunately, for all of us, this was his first course, and he wasn't familiar with the courseware, the training principles, etc. And looking back on it, it was probably a mistake to put him in the classroom right then and there. And in this case, the courseware was great, but the trainer's use of the courseware wasn't as good as it could have been. And of course, you will need to consider vendor-based solutions versus in-house made solutions. And this decision shouldn't always be based on the finance side of things, especially when you start considering the time, the skills, and the resources and experience are all factored into the decision-making process. Now, both vendor and in-house solutions have their pros and their cons, but what the best supports the learning objectives is really the key ingredient. Now, keep in mind that it can be painful at times to develop course material. Sometimes it can be a lot of fun. But course development does include times for things that people may not consider, things such as the project manager, your SMEs, your subject matter experts, and your trainer, your writers, your designers, your editors, your proofreaders. So you may have one person fulfilling several roles, but sometimes it's a single person for each role. Each person has a cost, to include lost opportunity costs. So for estimating the time to create material, I would often use a guide of 2 to 3 hours of work for 1 hour of class, and sometimes this is a low estimate. This was more applicable if I already knew what the material was and I knew it fairly well. But a big advantage of in-house material is the control factor that you get of what goes into the course rather than the cost factor. With internal development solutions, this can be time-consuming, as I mentioned, and may have a negative perception by others if in-house versus vendor-supplied materials are utilized for a course. So be aware of that. Oh, you designed your own materials, huh? Maybe a little bit of doubt comes about because of the in-house based materials. And also, some materials may be geared more for ILT or instructor-led training, but you're seeing more and more that are being used for web-based training, such as videos and so on. And special skills may be needed for some of these. You may need to go to external vendors for special skill sets or even for the whole course development. As an example, I am not a web developer that can go out and put in the Adobe Flash and tie it into a website and do the shopping carts and all that. That's definitely not my specialty. Given enough time, I'm sure I could figure it out, but you really want to pull in my case, I would want to pull in a subject matter expert that knows how to do that. Of course, generating costs. Now, the idea here is that you must balance how much training is needed in relation to the return on the investment. And always keep in mind that designing a technical course is really tough work. Now, here's a quick poll. How many of you have designed courseware for a course? I'm really curious about this. Poll, could you, excuse me, Guy, could you open up the poll? You already have, thanks. Wow. A much higher percentage than I thought have created courseware. I'm very surprised. That's really cool. So some of you know some of the pain. I've got one comment here saying yeah, something about Flash here. All right, yeah. Good. Okay, so it's almost 50-50. So half of you have, half of you haven't. Like I said, designing courseware can be a lot of fun, but it's also, just keep in mind, it's a lot of work as well too. When preparing for effective technical training, you'll need to understand why the technology is being implemented. And this leads, of course, to creating learner-centric course material. Now, we need to balance what the organization needs as a result and, of course, what the learners themselves need. So for a course to be successful, the employees must see the value of the technology and the training. Without their support and buy-in, the probability of the success of the course is going to probably be pretty low. And this is where change management is critical, and the motivation for the training should be established for the learners well in advance. Now, every one of the stakeholders of the training will want to ensure that quality is met. And this can be thought of meeting objectives and KPIs and class experience, but of course we need to define in advance what quality is. You ask a project manager what quality is, you'll get one, and you may get one answer. You ask an IT person what quality is, that's another question. You ask a finance person, you may get different types of versions of what their view of a quality is. So again, this is something you'll probably have to establish is what is quality in the context of what you're going to be training in. Now let's keep a few things in mind. Often adults like to learn things in chunks, and the flow of the course should be in logical steps that build upon one another. Now, if you are stuck with poor materials, that is, the quality is lacking a bit, take charge of the learning environment and start teaching. I remember a certain course put out by a major vendor where the order of the chapters didn't really build upon each other. They're really kind of independent, didn't tie together very well. So the overall flow wasn't what it should have been, and some of the key concepts just weren't presented very well. Now, although we as trainers were required to use the vendor materials, many of us modified the order of the course chapters. We added material and changed some of the exercises to better assist the learners in meeting their learning goals. So keep in mind that you may need to take charge when the course materials may not be optimal for meeting the course objectives of the course or even the audience that you're going to be addressing. Now finally, organizations as a whole should develop a style manual or a set of SOPs or standard operating procedures for course development. So you have an SOP and style manuals to ensure consistency, and they include clear elements of each module such as overview, the demos, the exercises, the reviews, a quiz, and so on. Now here's an example, kind of just as an aside, of what we mentioned last session as well as including in a style manual. Now this is an example from, I believe, the CSU, Charles Sturt University website that depicts a legend. This is a key part of navigating their site, and CSU is very consistent on using these symbols wherever I go throughout the site, and I've done a lot of exploration on that site. And I really like how they have a style manual and they stick with it. And this is something that I think a lot of companies could probably benefit as well too. If you open up a Microsoft course material as well, very beginning, or not very beginning, but towards the beginning, they will show you what, or they'll have a legend and show you what the different things mean and what they're supposed to represent throughout the book. Okay, let's take a look at the virtual classroom and have a little bit of a chat about this. Actually, after all, that's what we're really in right now. It's kind of a teacher ratio or instructor ratio of 1 to about 1,000 or so. Now the virtual classroom can still use course workbooks and job aids just like instructor-led training or ILT, but there are some constraints, and some of these are the instructor, me, I can't see you. I can't see what you're doing. We can't, we can't see the body language or whether the learner is paying attention and so on. Maybe you're off getting a drink of water. Maybe you're, playing a video game or something like that. As a trainer, I can't see that. Also, there may be frustrations if there are omitted steps or incorrect figures or incorrect formatting, etc. in the courseware. And finally, the virtual learner must rely heavily on the virtual classroom instructor and efforts by us in order to involve you, the learner, and we have to do more demos, more walkthroughs, and so on. Now, these are just a few challenges that we have and are by no means an exhaustive list. Now, probably some of the things we want to do is make sure that we're not too boring. So, regarding the VC materials or virtual classroom materials, again, this may mean that the instructor has to show more things such as slide decks, demos, drawings, multimedia events, and other interactions to promote the learning. And if you're doing a PowerPoint-only presentation, see that video that I posted last session, the one about throwing too much stuff out in there into PowerPoint, and I think it's entitled Death by PowerPoint. Learners do want you to show them the technology and how it works and what components are there, so let them play and break things. I like the play and break side of things, especially if, in my area, we're using virtual machines, because I'll usually have a snapshot, and if the student breaks something, I can roll it back within a few seconds to where it was working, and they can go through it again. Microsoft had these things online as well too, virtual machines. If you're doing your Cisco studying for switches and routers, they have virtual machines that you can roll back. So lots of different technologies for rolling back to a good starting point for the learners, so that they're not afraid of making a mistake. And as I always told my students, please, if you're going to make a mistake and trash a system, do it to mine. Don't do it at work. So please play here. Now keep in mind, of course, that your VC learners can't read your body language. Pick up your nonverbal cues. For example, you can't see me waving my hands around. So this presents a real challenge for us as well as for the learners. Now with that in mind, as I mentioned, the virtual classroom does have some pretty cool things that we can do. When you're really adding things such as, let's say clip art, for example. Well, if I'm looking at this, what does this have to do with anything? I mean, it looks just like a whole bunch of stuff was just kind of tossed onto a slide, but it really doesn't tie anything in together. So make sure that the figures that you're putting in there actually make sense. Something that I also like to use was mnemonics to assist memorizing things. For example, on our networking technology course, course number 200 from Novell, we had to make sure that we memorize the OSI model, the 7 layers of the OSI model. And so we used a mnemonic. So on the left-hand side is the TCP/IP model, the right side is the OSI model. So this is application, presentation, session transport, network data link, and physical layers. How am I supposed to remember that? Well, what I showed my students was all people seem to need data processing, or Domino's pizza, depending if it was close to lunch or not. Or if you want to go in the opposite direction, please do not throw sausage pizza away. So if you come up with something like this to help your students learn, or to memorize rather, some complex ideas, it might make things a little more interesting and a lot easier, especially if they're taking the exam. So let's keep in mind that training materials are supposed to support the instructor and the learning processes, but does not replace the instructor. Isn't that nice to know that you aren't supposed to be replaced? Well, unfortunately, the training materials can often be the largest expense of a training proposition. All right, this completes the section of using instructional media. So I hope you have a better understanding of this domain and will be able to apply some of this to your environment. Guy, can we open this up for just some quick question and answers so we don't have everything all at the
Yeah,
end?
sure. That's a great idea. Just a couple of comments first from the first poll. They wanted a combination option there. Megan Hirmans was saying that with regard to didactic versus facilitation, it depended on the subject. Sort of English and maths might be a bit didactic, whereas food, tech, and arts seemed a bit. And art seemed more facilitation.
Good point. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, a couple of those sort of comments. Also, Joking noted that it's interesting that we're listening to a webinar and that the audio listening was the lowest method preferred in the second poll.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry. I will say that's a bit tougher to address 1,000 or more people that might be online versus a smaller manageable class of, let's say, 16. When I'm doing the lower number classes of, let's say under 20, we do tend to have a lot more interaction, and I don't talk nearly this much.
And then there's a question from David Zilli. For virtual machines and IT equipment, are there any license limitations that we need to be aware of? For example, is it okay to use evaluation licenses, or are there any licensing models for training sessions? Mostly interested in bigger vendors like Microsoft and Cisco.
Ooh, boy. I would have to read the individual licensing, or I recommend that you read the individual licensing agreements on that. Now, with that said, there are some freeware, and also depending upon whether or not you're involved with the Certified Training Center. As an example, for Microsoft Certified Training, as a Certified Training Center, you get all of those licenses as part of your annual fees. You'll also get the virtual machines. They'll give you the virtual machines that are download, and it's all configured, etc. for you. So that's really the nice thing about the Novell side. My buddy of mine is a Cisco instructor, but a lot of the things that he teaches is a lot of it's pre-configured for him, and I can't remember how the licensing on that one works. Something to look into is the license usage on VMware. Now, VMware ESXi, I think it's 6 now, does have a free version for a single machine. Now, can that be used in a commercial environment or for education? I don't know. I've used it for testing purposes here at home. So I run both Hyper-V as well as VMware. The other thing also to consider, if you are an educator, you can quite often get some serious discounts on Microsoft, Apple, etc. on their type of technologies for classroom learning type of situations. So I can't give you a blanket answer on whether or not you can get free licenses and so on. It really does depend. Oh, something to take a look at maybe is Oracle Box. I think is what it's called. That will run on a Windows 7 systems and so on, and you can put a virtual machine on your PC, which is kind of cool to do. And Apple has the same type of capability, which might help you with some of the things.
Okay, maybe a couple more comments. David Bessel was saying that there's no fee for VirtualBox from Sun and it's a free download. A couple of other things concerning VM. I've used evaluation on VM, no problem, from Donald Whitcomb. And also there's a few questions about just asking for, I suppose, further explanation on a few things. I'll just say that just due to time, we'll probably just have to push on and just rest assured that the slides are going to be up on the IT Masters Learn website. And if you do have any questions, you can send them into short courses at itmasters.edu.au, and we'll get to them then. But yeah, I think any further questions, keep them typed in, and we'll get to those in the next little break.
Also, I appreciate the correction. It's not Oracle Box, it's VirtualBox by Oracle. So thank you. It's been a while since I've used that product. Great product, though. All right, let's see. Let's go ahead and move on to the next area of instructor credibility and communications. We won't be able to finish this portion off, but we'll give it a good start here. So moving on to our next section, this is really a fun section where a lot of us like to focus on self-improvement, always getting a bit better after every class. And we're going to be able to get started on this domain area today, but as I mentioned before, we're not going to be able to finish up until our next section. So let's give it a go. One of the key areas, I think, is instructing with confidence. Your level of confidence can be based upon years of experience as well as trial and error. And although I've been conducting training courses for over 30 years, I still get a bit nervous before every course. I check everything for something like 12 times as I want everything to be as perfect as possible. So you may also have butterflies. You may be sweating profusely, but you'll need to project confidence to include body language, energy, and voice, as well as knowledge and comfort about the topic at hand. You're going to end up as a technical trainer on developing your own teaching style to include rhythm, language, and diction that you use. You probably adjust your style as time goes on, and I've found it also is class dependent. So for some classes, I may need to adapt my style to the learning environment or the students. How you speak and present yourself may vary from class to class depending upon subject matter and the participants. So really what it comes down to at the beginning is instructor fundamentals. The learners want you to be an expert in the area. Students are most likely on your side and will give you the benefit of the doubt at first. But keep in mind, you can't fool a student for long, so you need to know the topic. I remember I had a contractor come in to teach a technical course, and the instructor came off as the instructor was a pretty good guy and engaging in the courseware. The courseware was really, really spot on, really good. However, when the student evaluations came in, they were dreadful and were filled with comments that the instructor really didn't know what he was doing. Well, suffice to say that I never invited that instructor back again. So, preparation is the key. A part of your preparation may include technology updates. So for your exam, keep in mind that as a trainer, you must confirm any changes to the technology, upgrades, hotfixes, service packs, etc. This is really your responsibility and part of being an authority on the technology. Also, something to be aware of is that the person configuring the classroom may not know much about the subject, so be sure to check the setup before class. For example, there may be incorrect IP addresses or incorrect materials, or you might be in the wrong classroom. That happens. You may want to consider creating a checklist of things to check prior to a course and get access to the classroom as soon as possible. The day before would always be a good idea. Even if it's on a Sunday, see if you can get access to that classroom. Know your audience. Why are they there? What are their goals for the class? What is their experience level? Also, be aware of your personal grooming and dress. Dress appropriately. Like what? Well, clean your fingers. Replace chip and polish. Comb your hair, to avoid bedhead. Brush your teeth. In some situations, you may need to show up in a suit and tie. In other words, in other places, you're going to be showing up in personal protective equipment, PPE. I remember a contractor we had for a technical course, and he was good with the technology. In fact, he was really good with the technology, and was a decent trainer, but always came in with a tie that had soup stains or food or something on his tie. Not the best impression on several levels, to say the least, and this went on for about 4 days. And I remember another contractor we had that had brushed hair on the front and brushed hair on the side, but seemed to forget that the back of the head also needs brushing. And this is just a typical example of bedhead. And the student had a good laugh every time the trainer turned around. A mental mindset is important as well before class starts. So perhaps to adjust your mental mindset, when you walk into the room, take deep breaths or stretch or whatever makes you feel a little bit more confident. Now, for those of you that want to focus on communication development, you may want to try out or try to consider a group called Toastmasters, all one word. They do an awful lot of presentation courses and critiques and so on. Really, I think a big thing, though, is to maintain positive energy, because you're the leader, so lead. Be friendly, yet authoritative, and as I mentioned before, please stay away from certain topics, such as sexual topics, race, religion, culture, age, and so on, because these can be some really hot-button topics. and for some people, and they can detract from your training sessions. So you really want to try to stay away from those if you can. Now, be sure at the beginning to define lecture times, breaks, etc. at the beginning. Write it down. Oh, wait, excuse me. I have a phone call. Yes? No, I'm just teaching right now. No, I can do that. Oh, not a problem. Sure, bye. Where was I? You know one thing I like to do? I like to ask people to turn off their phones or silence them and then use them on the breaks. I also do this prior to starting lots of meetings as well too, just as a courtesy, because as you just heard, I use a timer by the way for that one. Being interrupted by telephones and so on is a bit inconvenient, and it does cause a bit of a break in the class, and of course it does interrupt the other students. So let's try to avoid that. As I was mentioning as well, is that if you're going to have breaks, timings, and so on, set these up at the beginning. Ask them to turn off their telephones or to mute their telephones. I used to tell my students also that the end of the world will not come if you missed a phone call. Normally. Sometimes maybe it might for them, but normally it wouldn't. Write these things down on a whiteboard if possible, or even have a slide prepared for this, or even a handout if you think it's necessary. Now, occasionally there's going to be unrelated questions to the topic at hand, and these are distractors, so you might want to take some of these offline. Probably the best, boy, I can't overemphasize this enough. Above all, don't lie to the students. If you don't know the answer, tell them that you'll get back, or that you'll find out and get back to them, and then be sure to get back to them. Nobody can know everything. You may be a subject matter expert in your area, but let's face it, you can't know everything about everything. So if you say you're going to find out, be sure you do find out, get back to the student, and you know what? This really builds your credibility as well. Now, most people come to class to learn. Some see class as paid time off, yay! And some people just may not have the background for the class or just can't keep up. So you may want to show how, and you've got some others that want to show how smart they are and how quick they are with the answers. So observe behavior during the labs and lectures and try to determine what excites and motivates these learners. Now, as I mentioned before, I think it's a lot more fun when students are engaged, they ask questions, they add comments and so on. And again, I learn something from every class I teach. Some thoughts on how to engage the students in advance? Maybe beforehand, send an email off. Get them, greet them as they come into the room. Don't cut a person off when they're asking, when they're asking a question or they're speaking, and let them finish a thought or question. Be sure to make eye contact and smile and relax. Again, this is in the ILT area. Something you may want to avoid is the why questions until you have built a better rapport for the class. Well, why? Well, why can be argumentative and of course put people on the defense. Use open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions just are really good for quick answers, but people quite often want to do some sort of discussion. So some instructors like to have the questions held off until the end of the module, or others prefer the questions as a conversation moves along. It really depends upon the class, the schedule, the trainer, and so on, so be sure to explain in advance how you're going to handle the questions. Most students I've found don't require management because they're adults. A small fraction may cause some challenges. They're chatty. They don't want to be there. They're disruptive, etc. Probably the worst experience I've ever had was when I was teaching an installation course. It was an operating system installation course, and we had, I think it was 8 servers that we were installing. I had 16 students. We had 16 machines, but 8 of them were servers, 8 workstations. And one student completely and willfully disrupted the course on 3 different occasions during the first session of the morning. I was fortunate as this person's supervisor was also there, and I pulled the supervisor aside and explained the consequences of the student's actions on the rest of the class. And the student's conduct didn't improve, then I wouldn't be able to complete the training. So the supervisor then spoke to the student, and I didn't have a single problem for the rest of the week. All right, this pretty well concludes the session for this week, and of course we have a bit of homework to look at, as well as the references listed on our website. So regarding the homework, I'd like to get your thoughts on a classroom setup again. This time, as the trainer, you're responsible for ensuring the classroom setup is conducted prior to the course. So what is your checklist that you would go through prior to conducting the course, and what checklist would you provide to the training center in advance, if any, for them to test? So go ahead and post that to the forum if you would, please, and be sure to tell us what subject you'll be training. In some cases, you may just have a U-shaped classroom, as some of you were mentioning. In others, it might be a herringbone. You may or may not need PCs and so on. Our next session will continue with instructor credibility, and we'll also begin our discussion on group facilitation. Okay, may we open this up for question and answers, Guy?
Yes, absolutely. We'll start with one from Ryan Parks. How often would you recommend giving learners breaks during training, if it's, for example, a 1 hour long training?
I always tell my students at the very beginning of the class, breaks are not for students, they're for the instructor. They get a break when I'm tired. That usually brings out a couple of laughs, and I usually ask them, may I have a break about once an hour, once every 45 minutes? It depends upon how dry the subject is or what we're going to be doing, etc. But I like to give breaks about once an hour just to get them standing up, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is.
Okay. Is this course focused on hardware training? Will there be, we spoke last week, this is from Fred Gillen, how they do transfer, but can it be extended to hardware training?
This is hardware training. I've been using my background in IT for hardware training, for example, that I've done, software training, operating systems, I've taught Excel, etc. All the skills are pretty much, in fact, they all are transferable as far as how you get the students and the learners involved, some ideas to engage them and so on. One of the things I just saw going by was, what was lie and pay? On one of my slides. Lie and pay is, if you lie to the student, you're going to pay for it later. So if instead of lying to the student, tell them you don't know the answer, but you'll get back to them with the correct answer, or at least try to get the correct answer for them. Sorry about I wasn't clear on that one.
Okay, there was a question from Paul Hiles about why we don't use webcams so you can see our visual prompts. I think that's more something to do with our mugs.
That and bandwidth also, because video on the lines tends to be rather heavy versus the voice side of things. If you have really good lines and they would support video conferencing, that's great. But in the case of a lot of people, they may be remote users that don't have the large enough pipe to get the full video. So I stick to without.
And here's my excuse. I'm terribly sorry. Don't scare your children.
Thanks, Guy.
Okay, there's not too many questions left. Asking for an explanation or further explanation about VC challenges. Whether we've got time to go into that.
I'm sorry, which one was that one, Guy?
Can you explain about VC challenges, or further explain, further elaborate, perhaps?
Oh, for me, at least as a professional trainer, I like to have eye contact with my students. I like to be able to see what their body language is. I like to be able to see if the little light bulb above their head goes off. With the VC side of things, or the virtual classrooms, I can't do that, nor can they see me, how my body language, or what my body language is. But there are some things, as we mentioned, that we can utilize to try to keep the students engaged. For example, I can glance up here and see a dashboard on who's actually being attentive. Yeah, we caught some of you. Oh, it just jumped all of a sudden too. It's still jumping. So I can see that there's some of you are actually attentive, if you will, according to the software, and some of that you may not be. polling questions, as I mentioned before. What I also like to do when I'm doing online type of training is to have more quizzes, as an example, web-based quizzes, kind of like SurveyMonkey type of things where you can put together and post on the forum. I think Charles Sturt University, through their, if you're teaching for those folks, they also have that type of capability too. So just lots of different challenges, I suppose, on the VC side, but still fun.
How do you ensure, I suppose that's particularly relevant for a virtual, you were just saying, so the virtual class is controlled and all students given time to participate, from Martin Wabuke.
Oh, that's a really good point. And the other point also is it's recorded.
Yeah.
Quite often. And you can always play it back afterwards, which is a bit scary for me sometimes.
Yes, and rest assured, folks, that end of business or close of business Australian Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, we'll have the lecture up on the Moodle page or the IT Masters page, the course page for you. And that issue has been fixed. I'm not sure if everyone's been paying attention to the chat, but IT guru James got that sorted fairly promptly, so you can log on to that and download slides and course material.
Cool. Okay. Excellent. I'm glad that's up and running then.
Okay, there's a question from Kianush. Missed the session last week. Wonder if going through the study material on his own would be sufficient, and if he's still allowed to take the final exam at the completion of the course.
Oh, now you're starting getting into the running of the course. I believe so.
Yes.
You'd have to ask Margie on that one.
No, I can field that one, Steve. People can enroll in this course right up until exam week, and then if you're really keen on getting the certificate, sort of go through all of the course material, listen to all of the sessions, and participate in the forums as necessary to get through to the exam. So if you do have to miss a week, don't worry about that too much. You can always catch up or do 2 in 1 week, or do sort of 2 or 3 at the end if you've missed a couple. Of course, it just makes it quite difficult in terms of time commitment in that week of the exam week. But yeah, don't worry if you do miss something. I think there's not too many. We've got a question from Marion Walmerans. If we are more focused on virtual training, should we engage with the homework that is focused on classroom training?
That's completely up to you. You may find yourself, although you may be focusing on the classroom type of training, you may end up getting pulled into virtual training on an unexpected basis. I know that's happened to me on a number of occasions, where at work, as an example, I would have to show or train people on how to use a particular software package, as an example. So you can go either way for the homework assignment. That's completely up to you. I would probably suggest that you would go with whatever you think you're going to be doing, but like I said, I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire either way.
Okay. Question from Ryan Parks. For someone who is new to being a trainer, how would you recommend actually getting their feet wet in conducting a training course? Ryan's not in IT, but we'll have to facilitate trainings for college students in areas of career development and goal setting.
Oh, hey, this doesn't have to be IT in any way, shape, or form. This can be easily applied to project managers who want to teach project management type of principles. If you're working in a factory type of setting or a manufacturing type of setting, how to utilize new machinery or different processes. Like I said, I'm pulling from my IT background. Next session, by the way, I'll be pulling from scuba diving backgrounds, so you'll be hearing a couple of things on that side. So please, for those of you that are not IT, please don't focus that this is an IT test. I'm just using IT as an example for some of us. Now another one was, I'm sorry, you had a second part to that one.
Yes, for someone who is new to being a trainer, how would you recommend actually getting their feet wet?
Well, part of the prerequisites was 12 months of training, previous training for the CTT Plus. If you don't have that, that may not be a problem. If you have a chat with your company, You may become a subject matter expert or volunteer for doing some training sessions. For example, some companies have a lunch and train or train and lunch type of things where people bring their lunch to a conference room and a quick training session, 20 or 30 minute training session takes place. Maybe you can engage yourself in something like that. Or perhaps you could put together your own training plan for doing a presentation or doing some training there at your company. Have a chat with your HR section. Quite often, HR is in charge of doing the training for the company, and they may have a need for facilitators or for trainers in certain subjects. So there's a couple of areas just right through your own company that you might have some, might be able to do some training or have some training opportunities.
All right. For reasons of time, I reckon we should probably just move on. I'll just double check and see if Arif is around. Are you around, Arif? Hello, Arif.
Hello, hi guys. Can you hear me?
We can, yes. Everybody,
Okay,
welcome, welcome Arif. Dr. Arif Khan is a course director in the School of Computing and Mathematics at Charles Sturt University, and he's joined us to talk about the joint CSU and IT Masters courses. As always, if you have any questions of Arif, please send them in via the GoToWebinar chat, and we'll try to answer them for you. Yeah, we'll just have to get into that now. Hopefully, we won't be too long.
Yeah. Okay, so
I'll have to make you presenter, is that right?
yeah, that's right, exactly. Okay, so all right. Can you see my screen, guy?
Sure can.
Everyone?
Sure can.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's very good. And I hope that you can see my right screen, so with my presentation, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, excellent. All right, so thanks very much, Guy, and thanks, Steve, for the excellent session. That was really good. My name is Arif Khan, and I'm course director in Charles Sturt University in School of Computing and Maths. I will be talking a little bit about the Charles Sturt University that we call CSU and IT Masters courses tonight. Okay. All right, so just a brief introduction of Charles Sturt University. We are a regional university with multiple campuses. So you can see pictures here on this slide from our different campuses. So we got a campus in Bathurst, Wagga Wagga, Albury, Port Macquarie, Orange, and we got our partners in Sydney and Melbourne. So we are really a university with the spread of campuses in the different regional areas. Okay, going further on, from the 2015 data, Charles Sturt University is the national leader in postgraduate IT compared to the other universities. And you can see these stats on this screen. These are taken from the Good Universities website. So if you go there, you can find that in the postgraduate or the master level IT courses, we are the #1 in 2015 compared to other universities in Australia. And I was actually recently looking at the Good Universities website, and I found that we are actually #1 in the student retention criteria as well. So once students are enrolled in CSU or one of our partners, they stay with us until they complete their courses. So it's really a very good and happy news for the CSU and our partners, of course. Okay, just few quick facts about our courses. So all our courses, master level courses, they are fully accredited Australian degrees that you can complete in 2 years part-time while you're working. Okay, sorry. So our delivery method for our courses is the online. So as Steve mentioned, that we use our platform to reach our students via Interact2 tool that we call. So you really don't need to visit physically to our campus. You're more than welcome to if you want to, but for your educational needs you really don't need to visit. But we do see a lot of our students on the graduation ceremony, and which is very good. The entry pathway to our master level courses, we have really made a flexible entry pathways for the working professionals. So for example, if someone doesn't have the undergraduate degree, that's fine. If someone is working in the industry for a long period of time, we have a pathway that you can actually enroll into our postgraduate courses. And I will discuss that pathway in a minute in the coming slides, that which entry-level course you can come in and then you can move to the master level degree. Another important and attractive feature of our courses is that our subjects are based on the industry level certifications, and we give credit to the students if you have already done some kind of certifications. For example, I have listed here some of the certifications. If you are working in the information system security and you have a certification of CISP, you can get the credit for that. If you have a GIAC certified incident handler, you can get the credit for that. If you have done some kind of certification with the VMware or the Microsoft products and their certificates, you can get credit for that as well. So definitely you'll get the credit and recognition of your prior study as well as your industry certifications. And as I mentioned that, so you will be getting your degree from the largest IT provider university in Australia. So we are the largest online IT provider university in the Australia. Okay, moving on, just briefly mentioning the courses that we have with our partner IT Master. So one of our course is Masters of Information System Security. The second course is Masters of Networking and System Administration. Another one, we have Master of Management in Information Technology. We also have Masters of Business Administration, specialization in computing. We have Master of Mobile Application Development. This is our very recent and new course that we have introduced, and it's very successful, and a lot of students are enrolled in this course. We continuously work on developing new courses and upgrade our existing courses as well, so you may see some of the new courses coming in next year as well. Just to give you an example of one of the course that what is generally a structure of our master level course. So our master level courses, they are based on 12 subjects in total, out of which you have 8 core subjects. So for example, for this Master of Information System Security course, a student need to do these 8 subjects. Is a combination of the academic and the industry subjects. So you may have noticed that some of the subjects, they start with the letter ITC, and the others, they start with ITE or ITI. So the ITC, the subjects with the starting with the ITC, they are the academic subjects that you will be studying from the CSU lecturers and academics like myself, and the ITI or ITE subjects, they will be taught by the industry professionals from IT Master. Apart from 8 core subjects, you need to do 4 elective subjects, and we have categorized our electives into 2 groups. So the first group that you can see, Group A, is is based on the academic elective subjects. So you can see for this particular course, Master of Information System Security, we have listed 3 courses, and a student is free to choose one of these 3 courses. In Group B, we have list of our industry elective subjects. So for example, you can see here 6 subjects listed in Group B, and you can choose 3 of these subjects, and this will comprise total 4 your elective subjects. Just making a note here that even though we have a big number of other subjects available which are related to the other courses, and if any student is interested, for example, a subject which is not listed here, with the approval of course director and the IT masters, you can choose that particular subject as well. So this is the kind of general structure for our master level courses: 12 subjects, 8 core subjects, and 4 elective subjects. Okay, now just giving a brief summary of the entry requirements. And as I said, that we have tailored our entry requirements for the working professionals who may not have the formal academic degree, but they have a lot of experience, and they may have the industry certifications, so they can enter to our courses as well. But just mentioning here that our master level course requires a bachelor's or higher degree. Those people with the industry experience, they can also come through our master level course through the graduate certificate pathway. And our graduate certificates, they comprise of 4 subjects. And the good thing about this pathway is that once you complete those 4 subjects and you complete your graduate certificate, you become eligible to get admission into the master level course. And the 4 subjects that you complete in your graduate certificate, they will carry over as a credit towards your master degree. Okay, now a little bit about the graduate certificates. So of course, again, for the graduate certificates, the main entry requirement is that a student should have a bachelor's degree or an equivalent academic education, or maybe if you don't have the bachelor's degree but you do have IT industry experience, typically 3+ years, you are eligible to get the admission in graduate certificate. Now, when you're applying for the admission based on your industry experience, usually what we require that you list your experience and your job roles that you have worked previously in your career, and that comes to the CSU admission office and then to the course directors to assess that whether that experience is sufficient for the graduate certificate admission. If your experience is relevant to that particular field, in this case IT, most likely you get admission into the graduate certificate, and that's one of the pathway towards the master level degree. Okay, so after seeing this, you might be thinking that whether you are eligible for the master or the graduate certificate or not. So in order to check your eligibility, you can actually go to the IT Masters website, and then there will be a form where you can put your experience, and you'll get your assessment before applying, and you will be advised that whether you're eligible or not. Or you can go to CSU website directly. So you go to the csu.edu.au/apply, and you apply online. You upload all your documents, including your detailed resume and any other certificates that you have done, and our admission team will get back to you telling you that whether you're eligible for that course or not. With the graduate certificate, one of the attractive feature is that while a student completes total 12 subjects which are required for the master, you get actually 2 degrees. So if you enroll into the graduate certificate, you complete 4 subjects and then you move on to the master and then you complete rest of the 8 subjects. So in total you complete the 12 subjects, you spend the equal amount of time, you spend the same amount of money that you required for the master, but at the end you'll get 2 certificates, 2 degrees, 1 graduate certificate and 1 master degree. And this is there is another advantage for the students who wants to exit earlier rather than completing the master. So for example, you start your degree and after completing 4 subjects you think because of certain circumstances that you want to have a break, but you need to get a degree. So you will graduate with the graduate certificate in information technology or one of the course, and then you can come back later for your master study. The general hierarchy of the qualification that goes into the IT related courses or any other courses is that you have the undergraduate bachelor's degree and then you move on to the graduate certificate or the graduate diploma. And then the graduate certificate or the diploma leads you towards the master degree. And for most of the professionals, IT professionals are working in the industry, master's level degree is pretty much enough for moving in the vertical space in their career. But of course, after the master, there is a doctorate degree as well. That you can go if you want to, and that's the highest academic qualification in the hierarchy. In terms of time commitment, we run admissions for 3 sessions per year. So we have a session started in February, in July, and November. As a student, you can actually get admission in any of the session, and you can start your study in any of these 3 sessions in a year. You are expected to spend 10 hours of study per week on your course to complete your degree within the given time frame. In terms of selecting the number of subjects per session, you can do from 1 to 4 subjects depending on your pace, on what pace you want to complete your degree. Of course, you can have a break in your study as well. For example, if you have some professional commitments and you're traveling or some other, you can have a leave of absence. You can have up to 4 leave of absences in your degree. And if you want more than 4 leave of absences, you can still apply and your application will be considered based on your circumstances. So this is a way if you want to get some break during your studies. Okay, credit. This is one of the very important area and very important question. A lot of our students and applicants, they are interested in this one. We definitely recognize the prior learning at CSU and IT Masters, and we give credit for your previous study, for your previous certification, or we have actually recently developed the credit for the short courses that you do. For example, the short course that you are doing right now. So if you do a certain number of short courses, you'll get a credit towards the CSU and IT Master subject in your degree. So just summarizing that one, so you may be eligible for the previous postgraduate study. You remember that if you are doing master level study, you can't get credit for your undergraduate study. You need to have the postgraduate study to get the credit. You can get credit for your industry certification. Like I said, if you have done the Certified Information System Security Professional Certificate or other certification from the industry, you'll get credit for that. And the CSU and IT Master short courses, like the course you are doing now. So the rule is that if you complete 3 short courses combined from IT Master and CSU, you'll get a credit of 1 subject in your degree. However, we do not give credit for the work experience. This is just to keep in mind that if you have work experience and you want to claim credit based on that, that may not be possible. Credit is assessed as a part of your application process, and if you want to check that for how much credit you are eligible before your application, you can actually go to IT Masters website. There is a form there, so just fill up the form and submit that form with your certificates, and you'll get back the assessment of your prior education that you'll get the credit up for these subjects for this your study. Okay, now just briefly talking about the cost of your studies. For the Australian and New Zealand students, the cost for your study for per subject is 3,000 Australian dollar, and you remember that you need to complete 12 subjects in your master level degree, and for the graduate certificate you only need to complete 4 subjects. For international students who are studying as a distance education, the cost per subject is $3,100. This cost includes the textbooks. So for example, if you're enrolled in one of our course for the relevant subject, the textbook will be provided by the CSU or the IT Master. There is a little bit extra fees that is of the student services and amenities fee. This is very small portion of fee, but with this fee you get a lot of services from IT Masters and CSU both. For example, you can get the counseling service, you can get the academic literature and numeracy service, and a lot of other study link service. You can get a lot of services. They are listed both on the CSU and IT Masters website. You may also be eligible for the Commonwealth sport for your studies. So for that you can apply for the fee help program, and the detail of this information is available on the CSU website, that whether you're eligible and you can get this assistance for your studies from the Commonwealth government. Okay, now in terms of applying, that's very easy. You just have to apply online. You don't need to fill up any paper applications. So go to the csu.edu.au/apply site, find your course, and just follow a very simple procedure there and put up your application. As I said, we get intake for all 3 of our sessions. So our second session is starting in July, so it's particularly starting on 11th of July, and the admission for this second session are still open. So the admission date is the last closing date is 30th of June for entry of the second session. You can of course apply start for the, let's say, in the 3rd session or the first session in 2017, but you can apply now and you can mention that you are starting from that particular session. I would suggest that if you are interested, you should apply. Applying doesn't cost anything, so definitely if you're interested, you should go for that. Okay, I think that's all from me. So if you need any further information, I'm available for any questions right now, or even if you want to ask questions later on, my contact number, phone number, and email is available on this slide. From IT Masters, we have Neil McCosh, and Neil's phone number and email address is listed there as well. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you for listening me, and if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thanks very much, Arif. Really great presentation. Most of the questions that were asked you answered later on in the presentation. One question though from Mahdi Jafari is, can you speak a bit about scholarship programs in Charles Sturt? Is there any anything you can add with regard to scholarship?
Yeah. Okay. So these are the full fee-paying courses that we have. We do not have direct scholarships that cover all your cost in these courses. As I mentioned, you can get the support from the Commonwealth if you're the Australian or New Zealand citizens. If you're international students, there are some very small scholarships available, and we advertise that in the CSU website, but to be honest, they do not cover your full study cost.
Okay. All right. I'll take Edgar's comment. This existing course is relevant for the graduate certificate as a comment. It's a great course, and yeah, highly recommend that you seriously consider applying if you're interested. Thanks a lot, Arif. Steve, are you still about?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I sure am. Sorry.
Great.
I was muted.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Arif. Yeah, we look forward to hearing from you for next course. Steve, do you have anything else to add?
No, just thanks to everyone for their time, and look forward to seeing your comments or anything else on the forum next week.
Yeah, great. Just on that, Steve, there's one last question. We've got a question from Douglas Saziba about the checklist. He wonders whether, for the homework, the checklist should be unique to a specific delivery method, whether it be didactic or facilitation.
No, not really. I would prefer that the focus be on what the training that they plan on actually giving. So if the training is going to be more of a didactic approach, that's great. Go ahead and pop that in there. If it's going to be more of a learner facilitation type of thing, then put that in there. As an example, if I was teaching Boyle's Law for diving, then I would probably have some water, I would have a balloon, I'd have an overhead projector to go, show some slides and things like this. If it's an IT thing, I'd probably have computers and so on.
I love the sound of the water training. That sounds a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It is. Was, sorry.
All right. Well, I think we'll have to wrap it up there. We've gone a little bit over time, but that's all right. Thanks very much, everyone, for your questions. And thank you, Steve and Arif, for speaking tonight. And thank all of you students for joining us. Keep up the excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Keep up the excellent work in the forum, and feel free to post any questions you have there too. But for now, I think until next week, it's good night from me. And good night.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and good
Good
night and greetings. Yeah, greetings everywhere you are.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Thank you. Bye.